Thank you for joining today evenings. And again, today's topic, as sent by someone, one of the students. And I think maybe as you know, the question was, I find some of the topic difficult from the lumbering, for example, of past life and all sentient beings being your mothers. So how do I overcome that doubt? So I think that was the kind of the questions and the topic today. So there is no doubt these topics are not so easy and a little bit more complicated, more difficult in some of the other subjects. And can you hear? Yeah. Because the internet is not so stable here in Kopan, and sometimes it gets stuck. So I wasn't sure whether you are hearing me or not. Because sometimes same topic, same subject, when it is presented differently, because different teachers have different way of presenting it. And sometimes when you hear different presentations, same topic from different teachers, sometimes you might be able to connect with something that you are not able to connect with another teachers, even though it's same topic, but the way they present might be slightly different. So because of that, so therefore, again, and definitely, of course, Venerable Sanjifando is a very qualified teacher, so you can always ask, because that is part of Lamrim topic as well. And this topic required a lot of explanations, and I don't think we have time to go. We did go a little bit on past and future life before a little bit, but we haven't been able to go very details because it requires much more time. And even with all the explanations and the reasoning and logics that we find in Buddhist scriptures and all of that, for some people still, they might still struggle, about past and future life. They could still struggles. And for them, for some people, they need a direct experience. Once they have direct experience, then maybe that can clear their doubt, even in our time now, whether it is related with COVID, we don't want to hear so much of that, we have been hearing that for 2 years. And sometimes we don't want to hear too much, but whether it is about the COVID, whether it is about the vaccine, even though there are so many evidence and information, evidence out there, some people, even with all of that, they are not convinced. It is not that there is not enough information or evidence until it happened to themselves. until it happened to themselves or their dear ones, family, friends. Then they started thinking is real. There are so many people like that all over the world. So for some people, it is not enough having just the evidence, the informations. All the evidence, information are there, and sometimes they even read those. But still they don't believe that. It is not that there is not enough information there. It's not that there is not enough evidence there. For some reason, still they don't believe all the information out there, all the evidence out there. And when something happens to themselves or their dear one, near ones, then it really struck them. And that's, you can bring that example, and we have certain that kind of situation in our life so many times. Same thing, a lot of topic and concepts, whether it is reincarnations, past and future life, many other difficult subjects. There are a lot of, it's not just a belief, just a blind belief, but there are a lot of reasoning, logics, and some sort of, you can call proof or evidence out there if we really search and if you really study. But still, for some people, it will still not convince them. And then if they have the direct sudden experience, then maybe it might convince them, just like whether they have direct experience because they remember, or because through meditations for certain individuals, if your meditation well through meditation, then they can have that awareness, that awakening, and to be able to see that, for some through their meditation, then they might be able to have that direct experience. For some, they remember from the past, so that those are direct experience. For some, they have certain situations, they encounter certain situation, and then that situation kind of lead them to have that awakening, certain situations make them to that kind of awakening. Or now they say, oh, it must be that my past, because they encounter such a situation where they have no other explanation than about that. And all that is the only that makes sense to them. In that moment, then they begin to have more convictions, less doubt, and more of that. So those are direct kind of different experiences, different people have can overcome those different doubt, those kind of doubt through direct experience with different in that different circumstances, situations, and for studies, and any topic that you have not so convinced, whether it is past and future life or any other topic that you are not totally convinced, that you have doubt, then you need to more research and study more of those. It is just not just enough saying, oh, I don't believe it, or it doesn't make sense, I'm not convinced. You have to do more research, from many different point of view. I think there are plenty of information out there if we research. From Buddhist point of view, or also from other research that are done in modern time by different people as well. And for some people, those information can help, And for some people, the visuals help, stories and visual helps, and so also there are a lot of those also if you go in the research on YouTube, there are a lot of children and people who are where their experience was shared, about their rememberings. And sometimes you hear, you read it, it doesn't convince you, but like you actually see the person, the child itself, and the others recollecting and remembering. Then again, for some people, it stucks more clearly than you are just reading it, and so also from the medical and science point of view, even though they have not been able to come to conclusion to prove that there is nothing behind after the death, or that there is something after the death, but there is many of research that have come that started to caution mark, is there something after the death, because of some of the findings, some of the research they have done, even though they cannot confirm and prove at this point that there is a life after death, but they have come to a certain cautioning mark. Seems like there could be some, especially from a medical point of view, with a lot of experiences and research that they have done. And so again, those information also can be helpful, not only the reasoning logic that you find in Buddhist scriptures. We also study all of that, but also studying about not only about the recollections of past life by the high lama reincarnation, but by ordinary beings, as I mentioned. And then also about those new finding and informations now about what happens after death, or the possibility or different things after the death. So, when you do all this research, when you study, then you start to get more and more informations, and then some of them can be helpful to clear some of those doubts more, it can be helpful and beneficial to clear some of those doubts. For some, still it might not clear your doubt, still it might not clear doubt, as I mentioned. Even in the historically, it is explained that one of the great masters, Chandra Gome, from in the India, a Buddhist scholar, he was a non-Buddhist scholar before he kind of converted to the Buddhism. He was a great scholar from the earliest school of thought, and then later he found the Buddhist philosophy and more to his liking or his that, and then he converted. And then one time he and another scholars from the other schools, they were debating about past and future life, whether there is past and future life. So he was trying to prove there is, the other was trying to prove there isn't. And they both were great scholars, philosophers, and Chandra Gome couldn't prove, with the reasoning to the others, he found to convince the other scholar with whatever his reasoning, logics, and then it is said that to prove that he had with a certain mark in his body, then he passed away, and then he came as a child, born as a child with all those marks. And to prove him with so because you couldn't prove him with the reason and logic, so you have to prove him with that kind of direct. That is the only way that he could prove him and convince him. And of course, he was not just ordinary, just an intelligent and scholar, but he was a great bodhisattva as well. So therefore, they have this control, or whether they can end their life and have next rebirth immediately, and so he decided maybe he must have seen that it was very beneficial for that other being to be convinced of that. And so therefore, he reincarnated with all these same marks, both physical marks that he had before, and then through that he convinced that. And so that gives you a little bit of example of how it might not be so easy to convince someone, even with all this reasoning logic, even though they make sense. A lot of times those reasoning logic makes sense, but still our mind still have some doubt because of the imprint is so strong. The imprint is so strong. And again, the same thing, with all what is going, because some people are fed with all this misinformation over so many times. Then even they find the real information is hard to convince them. Do you get it? Because they have been fed with so much misinformation before. That's what we are finding about a lot of things now that is happening all over the world, including US. Also in Nepal, we have people who still doesn't take seriously about the COVID, because still there are people who think it's not real. There are still people who are against vaccines. And all these are based on misinformation that they have been exposed to. And so even you have the full information, because of there's so much misinformation, it's hard to overcome that. And same way, that is how our mind is. And so because we have like a misinformation, we have this so much of this past imprint of so many things. So then sometimes even there is enough information, and sometimes it's hard. So that is one thing, Once we have convictions in past and future life, then it is more easier to have conviction that all sentient beings must have been my mother, Then that makes more easier. If you don't have the convictions in past and future life, then of course, the conviction that all being has been my mothers, or my fathers, or my children will be difficult. Of course, it wouldn't. So therefore, to have that understanding that all sentient beings have been our mother, then first we need to have a conviction is in the past and future life, and then the concept of beginning lifetime, And so that we have to do more. You have to do more research. You yourself, have to do. Even though for myself, I grow up in this kind of community or society where we believe past and future life from the birth, because we grow in that kind of environment, society. And even though I've studied so much, still sometimes, I still have a little bit of, once a while, I still have some time. And so I still try to do research, I still trying to find not only from the Buddhist point of view, from others, new informations that are coming from the science, from the medical point, from the medical science and others, and trying to, and sometimes those information help to convince more into that, and so therefore, you can't just come to the class and then one teacher explain and expect that to clear all your, you have to do more research yourself. Of course, the teacher can clarify some things, can help in some of your questions, but also you have to read more, from the Buddhist point of view, what are the reasoning, logics, and all these different things, and stories about people who remembers, and then there are some of our more and more in recent time, more information that come through the medical science, people's experiences at the near death and many different things. And so when you have all this different information on all sides, then it helps to be more and more convinced in that, to bring you towards that and to clear those doubts. But also we shouldn't be so paranoid just because you are not, because you don't believe, or because you have doubt, therefore maybe I can't be Buddhist, therefore I can't practice Buddhist practices, or therefore I'm not a good Buddhist, or therefore I can't practice well, all the different topics, all the different subjects, or different practice. Even myself, when I do many different practice, some of practice I don't have total conviction at the moment, but I still do it. And some of them I started to have more clarity, more convictions after having done the practice over the time. Some practice I do because my teacher asked me to do, so much convictions, or even though I didn't have so much strong kind of, let's say, belief how that practice work or supposed to work, or as described. In the teachings, they describe about the benefit of the practice and so on, all of that. And sometimes I still have doubt how that benefit that way, and how all of that. And I'm not 100% convinced. I'm not 100% sure of that. But sometimes, some of practice I do because my teachers kind of advised me to do. And then after having done those practice over the time, then I started to have some clarity and about those practice, and I started to have more convictions and more trust in those practice as well. So again, that's our experience. At least that is my experience, and I hope that will be your experience as well. And also sometimes, when we practice and meditate on some of the topics that you are convinced, that you are sure, and when that practice get better and better, then that helps certain topic that you are not so convinced before, because they are related. For example, certain people struggles, let's say Guru devotions, another difficult topic, especially for the Westerner, another difficult topic in lumbering, the subject and topic of Guru devotions is not easy for a lot of people. But certain practitioners, even they don't have certain very strong practice of that, very strong practice of Guru devotion, because still they struggle with that practice. But when they started to meditate on whether it is an emptiness or whether it's a bodhicitta, and when they started to have a certain experience and realizations of emptiness, certain experience and realization of bodhicitta and other subjects, then they started to feel strong appreciations towards their teachers, towards their guru, who helped them to develop those realizations, experience. who taught them, who showed them the path, who give them advice, instructions, who inspired them. And because now they have found this incredible experience and realizations, and they see where it comes from. And then their appreciation, their sense of trust, and their sense of devotion toward the teacher naturally increase. It comes because of that. And then they have less struggle with the Guru devotions. Then it becomes more natural, easier, you know. And so simply, you know, that is how, so if you struggle with one particular topic because you have doubt, you are not totally convinced. One, you do the more research, trying to study more on that, but you shouldn't be so kind of bulk and overwhelmed by that. And instead, you try to continue to practice on certain topics, subject that you feel confidence and convinced. And so when you do that practice better and better, maybe that could help, as I give one example, help to have a, to clear some other doubt and confusion towards other practice. Because, you know, so, yeah, of course, I think without the convictions and without the belief in past and future life, definitely it can be, without that, then many practice you can still do, but it become a little bit kind of not, the practice can become not as profound as it can be. It doesn't mean you cannot do the practice. You can still do practice, but if you have the basis of convictions and belief in past and future life, that convictions, that understanding can help to other practice to become more profound, more stronger, more. For example, the concept of karma. Even without the belief in the past and future life, still we can have a little bit understanding of karma within this lifetime. You know, if I shout at someone, then most likely they will shout at me. And so, like that, instant kind of within this lifetime, the result, experience and result within this lifetime. One can have certain understanding, one can still have certain understanding of concept of karma within one lifetime. But if you don't have the concept of many lifetimes, then it will be very limited, very limited. That practice and understanding karma will be very limited. Very limited, and there will be a lot of experiences that we will not be able to experience without taking the past life, how that experience, if you just try to see what's the result of that experience within this lifetime, it will not be easy, And same thing, without that, then even though one can still develop practice the bodhicitta by relying on equalizing exchange self with others, but then without that understanding of past and future life, then we would not be able to use the other technique of 7 point of cause and effect, because that 7 point of cause and effects is based on understanding of many lifetimes. So then you still can have certain techniques, certain meditation, but you don't have access to all different techniques, all the different meditations, if you don't have that. But if you have that understanding, then it allows you to have many more different methods of practice meditations. And so when you have more method and more practice, then your practice becomes more stronger, more profound. And so that is something that I wanted to kind of just share. But at the same time, if you don't believe in that, that doesn't mean you cannot practice, or you can't be a good Buddhist or good practitioner as well. You know, definitely you will be limited to some degree with many practice. And then, you know, also your practice of refuge will be also limited. Your practice of, you know, many of the small scope practice will be limited, you know, without that understanding. And when your practice of small scope limited, then that will affect your practice of middle scope. That will be also limited. And because your practice of middle scope is limited, your practice of high scope will be limited, because that is how it affects. So definitely your practice would be more limited, more narrow, and not as profound and not expansive and extensive as it can be. So I think this is more kind of like general kind of informations dealing with those different doubt, and that kind of different doubt and what do you call skeptic or doubt, unclear. Yeah. So, and even though we are talking about past and future life and whole sentient being our mothers, but you can apply that general concept to all the practice or teaching that you find not so convincing at the moment, or have some doubt or skeptic of some part. We can apply that kind of in general in that. So I thought of doing that more than actually trying to use all the reasoning and logic from Buddhist point of view, why there is past and future life. Okay, I think because I think if you want to do that, that will require, I think, maybe few sessions and more discussions, and even with that many sessions and discussions, still some people might not be, still their doubt might not be clear. For some people, their doubt might be clear, because when you find a little bit few more information from here and there that makes sense to you, that can clear, you know. So it doesn't guarantee that it will clear all your doubt, but for some people it might help to clear as we have more information. So I think maybe I think that is all I think at the moment. So maybe if you have any questions, I will take that. Does anyone has any questions? Yes, John, I can see your hand rising.
Sorry, Geshe, can you hear me? I have a problem with
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Look, it was concerning last week's talk regarding Tongling, and when how do you see, if you're taking all of the suffering off myself, obviously then there's two selves. How do I see? How do I see the other self? Do I see that as my enlightened self that will take off this suffering, and then I can aspire to be that? Would that be, or how would I see those two selves, I guess?
Is there two self? I'm just
Don't
kidding.
say that.
Generally, in a teachings, they talk about like yourself, for example, okay? The suffering of your, which you might be experiencing tomorrow or next week or next month or next year or coming days, you take all this suffering now, okay? Suffering of yourself that might be coming in the futures, or the cause and condition that are waiting there to produce suffering in the futures. You take all of them now, so then you don't have to experience that in the future. So as though all the suffering that the potential to experience in the future, you take on now itself, at the moment itself. So that is how it is. But for our visualization, for some people, it might be helpful if you can visualize your oneself, just like yourself, in front of yourself. Okay, you visualize, duplicate of yourself in front of you. Okay, and just as you do practice with others, contemplating on their pain, their suffering, and cause of suffering, and cultivating a compassion for that person, and then developing the wish, out of that compassion, the wish to take on their suffering on yourself, and then actually imagining, visualizing, actually taking on yourself. In that way, you can do same, your duplicate in front of you, and then you try this self, try to contemplate on your duplicate and yourself, which you are visualizing in front of you. Whatever the pain, whatever suffering, whatever difficulties, whatever challenges that there is, and then you try to develop, understand the pain, the sufferings, and the wish, and then the wish to free the pain and suffering. And so with that sense of compassion, then you try to visualize taking that pain and suffering of your, which you are visually in front of you, of that all pain, suffering, and cause of all pain and suffering on yourself, and then freeing that yourself from that way. So if that visualizing, for some people, that kind of visualizing can be helpful. For some, maybe it is not required, isn't it? So it depends on the individual, so you can see what is more helpful, effective for yourself when you're trying to take your own suffering on yourself, either with that kind of visualization or without that visualization. And whichever you find more effective, helpful, you can do that way. Is that clear? Okay.
Yeah, I guess I had a good thought that if I see my enlightened self taking off all suffering that I have now, it's something to aspire to. I don't know whether it's, I'm kidding myself being able to pass on all this, dukkha that's around me at the moment onto another self, or.
So can you repeat, because I didn't hear, because my internet get stuck. So now I can hear you.
Yeah, well, I had this good thought. I thought that if I saw myself, the two selves, the other self being like an enlightened me in the future, taking off all this dukkha that's surrounding me now, that'd be pretty good. And then I thought, well, maybe it is, but maybe I'm kidding myself that I can find something else to take all this crap off me and I can give it to them. But I don't know. One part of me tells that's not a bad way to look at it. Like another me, an enlightened me in the future, taking off the not, well, I was suffering or the confusion. And then, but on one side, I think maybe I'm just deluding myself into thinking, oh, I can just pass up all this suffering onto this. I don't have to experience myself. It'll go to this enlightened me of the future. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you have points. Yes, you have to check out. You have to check out, because you want to kind of, just because it feel like, because enlightened being doesn't have to experience the suffering. So if you do that, then so then you don't have to take the suffering on yourself. If that's the case, then the practice might not be so effective. Can you hear?
Yes, thank you. Welcome back, Geshe-la.
Yeah, my internet is that is what the connection here is not good at all. So it comes and goes. And so regarding the John's questions, I think I was saying, if you are trying to do that visualizations, yourself is enlightened, and then taking the suffering of others unenlightened John by that enlightened John. If the reason is because the unenlightened John is afraid of taking the suffering of other unenlightened John, then maybe the practice might not be so effective by transforming into enlightened. But if maybe something in our mind, maybe we think, oh, I'm unenlightened, and a delusion so forth of that unenlightened, then maybe that might be okay. And can you hear? Did you hear?
That, for me, Geshe-la, that cut out just for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, me too.
Could you please repeat, Geshe-la?
Yeah, I was so I don't know where it got cut, but I was saying, so for example, if you are visualizing two, one is more enlightened and enlightened John and unenlightened John. So then enlightened John on the suffering and confusion, delusion of unenlightened John. And in doing that, because you feel more comfortable in that, because unenlightened John, especially the delusion, the confusions. And so to take that, because it is enlightened beings, can help you to take your confusion, your delusions in that way, then maybe it might be okay. Yeah. Any other questions? Because before I think I saw caution, but now after my internet went, I think the caution are lost in the chat box. I think someone seems to have sent in the chat box before, so you might have to send, because when my internet went, I think it got lost. I don't see in chat box anymore. Okay. There's another questions of the mind being beginningless and endless. If we have understanding of mind, first of all, I think, before even we talk about mind, even in terms of material, compared to mind, from Buddhist point of view, the material world is much more, what do you call, less subtle, okay? The mind, the concept mind is much more subtle, because it's formless and non-matter. But even if we talk about matter, the continued matter, in one way, isn't it is a beginningless? Our world come from the Big Bang, that is from whatever, from that, and that goes back and back. Even the matter even the matters, even those subtle matters that form from all other matters, isn't that beginningless? If it is if there is beginning, where did that come from? Who created that? And even with this, it continues. Even after our world kind of disintegrate, still the matter from that subtle matter will continue, and maybe it will create another world or whatever, as something else. And when it comes to the mind, it's much more subtle, and therefore, if you say there is a beginning, how does it come? Where does it come from? It doesn't questions. Then if you say there is a beginning, then the idea of all creator God, who created, and from there it begins, then make more sense. Before that, there is no mind, and then there is all-powerful creator God, and then the all-powerful creator God created the mind, and from there it begins. You can say that. But if you don't have that concept, there is someone who is more powerful, who created, then if there's a beginning, where does that come from? What is the cause of that? So therefore, beginningless and endless make much more sense. On reasoning, and not because it is said in teaching, but when I use kind of reasoning and logic, does it make sense if there is a beginning, or it does make it more sense if there is non-beginning? To me, it makes more sense if there is no beginning. If there is a beginning, then I struggle. Who created that? Where does that come from? So, and same with the continuity, it goes continuously, and as I was saying, even the physical matter, it continues. It changes the forms, tree dries, but still some matter from that tree, whether it becomes soil, whether it becomes something, and that there is in a subtle level, it transforms in something, but it continues, And same thing, of course, there is an end to the tree, but that doesn't mean that that continuity, that the matter ends, it turns into something else. And so there is continuity, it continues. Same with our mind, our mind can transform from unenlightened to enlightened. And even within the, very unenlightened, a little bit more enlightened, a little bit more enlightened, a little bit more enlightened, less and less delusion, and like that. And like that, it transforms, but still there is the continuity. And so therefore, it makes more sense